Hi, today is February 12th, and I just want to welcome you back. We're walking through the Bible. We're answering the questions, who am I? Who is God? And what the heck are we doing together? I want to remind you once again that you were created in God's image in Genesis 1:27. And in Exodus chapter 3, Moses asked God who he was, and he said, I am, capital letters. And if you're created in his image, your identity is I am. You just are. And God gave you value because he gave his only begotten son, and you can't put a price on that. So that makes you priceless. You have identity, you are, and you have value, you're priceless. So let's learn a little bit more about who God is, because when we learn about God, we're going to learn about ourselves. When we learn about ourselves, actually, we can kind of learn about God too, because we're created in his image. We're going to refer to chapter Exodus in chapter 34, 1 through chapter 35, 9, Matthew 27, 15 through 31, Psalms 33, 12 through 22, and Proverbs 9, 1 through 6. And Israel, we meet them like shortly after they almost got annihilated because they created a god that was man-made. Aaron, according to his words, he threw gold into the fire and it just popped out, this golden calf that the people worship. And God was so angry. Rejection is something he does not take well, just like us, or maybe we're just like him. And he said, Moses, get out of the way, and I'm going to destroy this people. Moses said, no, God, you can't, because, your name would be mud. The Egyptians would say, look, he took them out so he could destroy them. So he appealed to his name, his reputation. And he also said, but you promised Abraham, you promised Isaac and Jacob. And so God relented. He changed his mind. So they survived. But so today is a redo. We're starting over again. And Moses was invited back up to the mountain, and God, met with him again, and he wrote the 10 commandments once again. And we say commandments like, it's a bunch of do's and don'ts, but I like to, the literal word for the 10 commandments, the literal word is words. And so I'd like to consider this and ask you to consider this as a marriage vow or relationship vow. And these are the conditions of the covenant. And if you look at it in that way, you have a different perspective about these 10 commandments, and it's about relationship. The first 4, relationship with us and God, and the next 6 are relationship with us and the other people that God loves. So when God passed in front of Moses, he called out his own name, Yahweh, the Lord, and then he describes himself, the God of compassion and mercy. Our God is compassionate. He has compassion for us, and he's merciful. He said, I'm slow to anger. He's long-suffering. I'm slow to anger and filled with unfailing love. He's unfailing love with a place to go, looking for a place to go, and faithfulness. And he says, I lavish. Can you just feel that word, lavish? It's like a waterfall of God's love. Lavish. I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin. But there's a 3-letter word. The opposite side of it is, I do not excuse the guilty. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren. The entire family is affected, even children in the 3rd and 4th generation. Some translations call this a generational curse, 3rd and 4th generation. But, and I'm not arguing with that, but you could also understand it as a generational influence. There's an influence of addictions and abuses. And, even if the children say, I'll never be like my parents, there's this influence that's there. Without God's help, without his power, and without Jesus Christ's sacrifice, because he sacrificed himself, or he was sacrificed on the cross. He laid down his life as a sacrifice so that he could reverse the curse, so that we could claim release from the curse of Adam and sin, and also from the curse of our generational influences. And so God promises Moses that he's going with him, and he says, if you listen carefully to everything I command you today, then I will go ahead of you and drive out all the people who are living in the promised land. But don't make a treaty with them. Don't be one with evil. And he says, you must worship no other gods, for the Lord, whose very name is jealous, is a God who is jealous about his relationship with you. Jimmy Evans talks about the law of priority. You have to make your spouse in marriage first. And these are marriage laws. He talks about marriage laws. The laws of love is his current description of these laws. The law of priority means that your spouse is first above everything. Accept your relationship with God, but even above church activities, your spouse is first. If something is happening, your spouse is your first choice. And God is saying, I want you to make me the first choice. I am God, so there's nobody above him. He says, I want you to make me first. Make me a priority. The law of priority. And Jimmy Evans says, if you do not do that, if you break that marriage law, then your spouse has a legitimate jealousy. There's a legitimate jealousy when that law is broken. And the other law, the law of purity, when you're not faithful to your spouse, there's a legitimate. It's not that green-eyed monster that we talk about. It's not self-centered. It's legitimate. Somebody in a marriage covenant, in a relationship covenant, can expect the other person to make them, put them first and be faithful to them. Unfailing love and faithfulness. And God says, I'm a jealous God. I want you to be faithful to me. And he talks about the festivals, Passover and the harvest festivals. And then he talks once again about the Sabbath. He is very serious about the Sabbath. You work on 6 days and you rest on the seventh, because the seventh is date night. It's a time that you can just really only concentrate on God, and God will show you the delights. And it's just, I don't know, it's just date night. It's the best way I can describe it. And so Moses is described when he comes down off Mount Sinai after being with God for 40 days and 40 nights. His face had become radiant because he had spoken to the Lord. And that was verse 29. And the people, when Aaron and the people saw the radiance of his face, they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called out and asked them to come near. And then he had to put a veil over his face to protect them from the glory of God. And again, the Sabbath day is repeated over and over again. In chapter 35, he says, you're gonna, I want you to work 6 days, but rest the seventh. And then God, just really talks about there's some serious consequences. And we know that physically, if your body doesn't rest, it will tear apart. If you don't have sleep, you can't survive, I think 3 days, maybe 4, without sleep. Your body will tear, it will just break apart. And so it's a good thing to rest. Matthew chapter 27, we're following Jesus, and he's walking through the steps to get to the cross, and the people are just kind of pushing him along so he's in front of the pilot. He's in front of the governor. The governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration. Now, Jesus was crucified during Passover because he was the Passover lamb. And the tradition is to release one prisoner. Now, there was a notorious prisoner that was in their prisons, and his name was Barabbas. Barabbas means the son of the Father, and he was guilty. And Pilate came out and he said, do you want me to release Barabbas, the son of the Father, who is very guilty and condemned? Or do you want me to release Jesus, and we know him to be the Son of God, who was innocent and there was no sin in him at all? And the people said, we want Barabbas, release Barabbas. And they want Jesus crucified. Pilate knew they were making a big mistake, but he was trying to prevent a riot, and they were on the verge of a riot. And he said, okay, I'm innocent of this man's blood. You get what you want, but I'm innocent. He said, the responsibility is yours. And they all yelled back, we will take responsibility for his death, we and our children. And they, with those words, they put a curse on themselves and their children. Again, Jesus died. They were crucifying him. And as they were crucifying him, they were putting a word curse on themselves. And Jesus was giving himself so that so Jesus Christ could reverse the curse, even of the people who crucified him. That's overwhelming to me. That's absolutely overwhelming. When you wrap your mind around that, it's just overwhelming that Jesus Christ would do so much for people who would crucify him. So let's go to Psalms chapter 33. And we talk about, the psalmist talks about the Lord looking down from heaven, and he sees the whole human race. Verse 13, from his throne, he observes all who live on the earth. He made their hearts, so he understands everything they do. So as a creator, he made our hearts, so he understands us. Verse 18, but the Lord watches over those who fear him, those who rely on his unfailing love. He rescues them from death and keeps them alive in times of famine, and our hope is in him. Proverbs chapter 9 talks about wisdom inviting the simple to come and sit and come and eat. Those who lack judgment, she says, come with me and sit down with me, sit down at my table. Leave your simple ways behind and begin to live. Learn to use good judgment. Now the wisdom, the Spirit of God is also the spirit of wisdom. When we have a fear of God, it's the beginning of wisdom. So God and his Spirit, the Spirit of wisdom, is inviting us to sit down with him. I've heard the term, have you ever heard the term, well, they might not be the sharpest tool in the shed. Well, the sharpest, if they're not the sharpest tool in the shed, they can come and sit with God in his Spirit of wisdom, and God's wisdom will make them the sharpest tool in the shed, and will continue to help them to increase in wisdom. God is good. His mercy is everlasting, and he lavishes his love on us. I just want to remind you once again, you are who you are, and you're priceless, and I want you to have a blessed day.